Lily hadn't spoken a word in 127 days. Not since the night flashing red and blue lights filled her living room. Not since she was lifted from a stained mattress in the back bedroom and carried out by a stranger in a badge and a navy windbreaker. She hadn't made a sound, not a cry, not a scream, just a still, wide-eyed silence that pierced deeper than any sob ever could. She was 3 years old, but something in her eyes belonged to someone much older. Trauma social workers would later say developmental shock, a self-protective retreat into silence. But none of those labels captured the ache behind those brown eyes, the kind of sorrow children shouldn't know. Her caseworker, Marla Jennings, had seen plenty in her 15 years working child welfare, but Lily was different. She doesn't just not talk. Marla had told the child psychologist during an early evaluation. It's like she's somewhere else entirely. She doesn't look at you, doesn't flinch, doesn't even react when other kids cry. It's like her heart is turned off. Lily had been placed with a foster family in a quiet suburb. The Matthews, Rachel, and Greg were seasoned foster parents with 2 grown sons and a decade of experience with children from hard places. Their home was cozy, filled with soft lighting, warm meals, and an endless supply of picture books. And patience. Rachel, a retired kindergarten teacher, had tried everything: singing, rocking, finger painting, puppets, even baby sign language. But Lily responded to none of it. She sat in silence, often curled up with a stuffed rabbit she brought from the shelter, its once white fur now gray and matted. She's not aggressive, not disruptive, Greg said one night after Lily had gone to sleep. But she single quotes absent, like she's not living in her own body. Rachel nodded, brushing tears from her cheeks. I don't think she knows. She's allowed to feel safe. Weeks turned into months. The silence remained. No words, no laughter. Even in play therapy, where children often revealed their feelings indirectly, Lily remained mute. She'd sit in the sandbox, staring at the grains falling through her fingers. Once, she picked up a toy horse and stared at it for a long time, then gently set it back down without a word. She's smart, the therapist told Marla during a progress meeting. She's watching everything. But she doesn't trust the world enough to participate in it yet. Still, the deadline loomed. The court had scheduled Lily's custody hearing. After months of gathering reports, evaluations, and family histories, a judge would finally decide: would Lily return to her biological parents or remain in foster care permanently? Legally, the parents still had rights. Despite clear signs of neglect and emotional abuse, they had completed parenting classes and attended required counseling. They presented well on paper, but Marla had her doubts. She's terrified too. Go back, Marla said to Rachel one evening after a particularly quiet therapy session. She can't say it, Rachel whispered, but we can see it. In the way she freezes when she hears loud voices, or how she hides in closets when the doorbell rings. Marla nodded. But in court, silence doesn't always speak loud. Enough. The day of the hearing arrived. It was early spring. The courthouse stood solemn and gray under an overcast sky, surrounded by parking lots and tired trees just beginning to bud. Inside, the waiting area outside the family courtroom was filled with quiet tension. The rustle of papers, the click of pens, the soft murmurs of attorneys preparing statements. Lily sat on a padded bench beside Rachel, her rabbit clutched tightly in her lap. She wore a soft yellow dress, chosen by Rachel for its warmth and optimism, and tiny white shoes with pink laces. Her dark hair was brushed neatly, tied with a pale blue ribbon. She looked like a doll, silent, still, and heartbreakingly fragile. Rachel squeezed her hand gently. We're here, sweetheart. You're not alone. Lily didn't look up On the other side of the hallway, Lily's biological parents sat with their attorney. The father, tall, with a shaved head and tattoos peeking from beneath his dress shirt, scrolled through his phone. The mother sat with her arms folded, eyes downcast, chewing the inside of her cheek. No one spoke to Lily. No one except the woman in the red blazer. A few minutes before the hearing, a new figure entered the waiting area. She was in her 40s, with calm eyes and a kind smile. Her name was Dana, and she was a certified child advocate with the courthouse's therapy animal program. In her hand, she held a leash. Attached to it, padding beside her with an eager wag of his tail, was Max. Max was a golden retriever with soft eyes and a gentle demeanor. He had been trained to support children in high-stress environments. Hospitals, therapy rooms, and increasingly, courtrooms. He had sat beside dozens of children during testimony, offering comfort with his quiet, steady presence. When Lily saw Max, something shifted. It wasn't traumatic. She didn't gasp or smile or reach out. But her eyes, those weary, haunted eyes, finally focused. She stared at Max, long and hard, as if trying to remember something she once knew. "Hi there," Dana said softly, crouching to Lily's level. "This is Max. He's here just to be your friend. Would it be okay if he sits with you today?" Lily didn't speak, but her grip on the rabbit loosened. Max took a step closer, then another. He sat down at her feet, tail gently thumping, and waited. After a long moment, Lily reached out, slowly, as if afraid he might vanish, and touched his fur. A courtroom clerk stepped into the hallway and called, "All rise for the Honorable Judge Monroe." Donna looked at Rachel and nodded. "Let's bring Max in with her." In the moments that followed, nothing would seem extraordinary to an outsider, a child, a dog, a quiet entrance into a courtroom. But for those who knew Lily, who had watched her exist in silence for 127 days, the quiet connection between a broken girl and a gentle dog marked the beginning of something incredible. What no one knew then, not the judge, not the lawyers, not even Rachel, was that in just a few minutes, Lily would finally break her silence, and what she said, would change everything. The heavy wooden doors to courtroom 3B creaked open slowly, revealing a chamber bathed in a somber hush. Warm oak panels lined the walls, and a tall American flag stood to the right of the judge's bench, unmoving. It was a place where life-changing decisions were made, and often where voices were never truly heard. This morning, every seat in the room felt heavier. As Lily entered holding Rachel's hand, her small steps made almost no sound on the polished tile floor. Max trotted dutifully beside her, his golden coat catching the sunlight that streamed through a high window. The bailiff, a tall man with silver hair and a square jaw, glanced down as they passed, then looked again, not at Lily, but at Max. His eyes narrowed slightly, as though unsure whether the dog belonged in the courtroom. Dana, the therapy dog handler, stepped forward and offered a calm explanation. "He's certified." Judge Monroe approved his presence for the child. The bailiff gave a slight nod, then motioned toward the witness box. "She can sit right there, with the dog." Lily didn't resist. She didn't speak either, but she followed quietly. Max curled up at her feet, like he had done 100 times before with children in crisis. His breathing was soft, his presence grounding. He didn't look up at anyone else, only at Lily. Across the courtroom, her biological parents watched. The father crossed his arms over his chest and leaned back in his chair, expression unreadable. The mother, pale and tense, shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Judge Monroe entered shortly after, a stern woman in her early 60s, known for both compassion and a sharp eye for manipulation. She took her seat at the bench and scanned the file in front of her, before glancing up at the girl sitting beside the dog. "Is this Lily?" she asked softly. Rachel stood and nodded. "Yes, Your Honor. She'll remain with Max for." "The duration?" the judge continued, raising an eyebrow. "Yes, Your Honor," Dana replied. "He's here to support her emotionally. We found that children like Lily often respond to him more than adults." Judge Monroe paused, then gave a single nod of approval. "Very well." As the hearing began, the court clerk read through the formalities, the case number, the petition for custody transfer, the summary of prior reports. It was all sterile, procedural, emotionless, everything Lily's life had not been. Marla, the caseworker, was the first to testify. She walked to the stand with her file held tightly against her chest. Her eyes flicked toward Lily before. She spoke. "Your Honor," she began. "Lily came into care 4 months ago after a neighbor reported sounds of violence and prolonged crying from the home. Upon arrival, officers found the home in disarray. Lily had visible bruising on her back and upper arms. She was severely underweight and demonstrated signs of neglect. No other children were present in the home." "And the parents?" Judge Monroe asked, not looking up from her notes. "They claimed the marks were from roughhousing. They denied abuse. CPS began regular visits afterward, but Lily remained largely unresponsive, withdrawn, and nonverbal." The judge raised her eyes. "Nonverbal by choice or condition?" "Choice, we believe," Marla said gently. "Her vocal cords are fine. But she hasn't spoken since the day she was removed. Not to me, not to her foster parents, not even in therapy sessions." A beat of silence passed. The courtroom felt like it was collectively holding its breath. Next came the testimony of the biological parents. Their attorney, a sharply dressed woman in her 30s, began by emphasizing their cooperation with CPS, parenting classes, drug screenings, couples therapy. "They've completed every requirement," she sighed, addressing the judge with polished conviction. "My clients want their daughter home. They've shown commitment to her well-being, and there is no conclusive proof of intentional harm." Rachel's hands tightened in her lap. She bit the inside of her cheek to stay silent. She had seen the fear in Lily's eyes. The kind of fear that didn't come from roughhousing. The biological mother took the stand next. Her voice was soft but emotionless. "I made mistakes," she admitted. "I let things get bad. But I never hurt her on purpose. The father didn't speak." He declined the stand. He just stared straight ahead, as if this were an inconvenience he wanted over with. Judge Monroe asked a few direct questions. "Do you believe your daughter is ready to return to your home?" The mother paused. "She's my daughter. I think she belongs with us." The judge's face revealed nothing, but her pen stopped moving. Then came Rachel. She took the stand with steady nerves, though her hands trembled just slightly in her lap. "She doesn't speak, Your Honor." "But she speaks with her eyes," Rachel said, "with her body. When she hears loud noises, she hides. When a man raises his voice in a movie, she covers her ears and starts shaking." "And how does she act around you and your husband?" the judge asked. Rachel smiled sadly. "She follows me everywhere. She watches me when I cook, when I fold clothes. But she's never more relaxed than when she's with Max." The judge looked over at Lily, who sat quietly, her hand resting gently on Max's fur. Her eyes were open, alert, not afraid. "And has she spoken to anyone?" the judge asked. Rachel hesitated. "No, not yet, but I believe she's close." As if on cue, Max lifted his head and nudged Lily's leg gently. The girl looked down at him, then around the courtroom. Dozens of adult eyes were on her, watching, judging, waiting. But Lily didn't shrink. She looked at Max and the first time that day, opened her mouth. Everyone stopped. She whispered something, but no one heard it clearly. Rachel leaned in. "What did she say?" the judge asked. Rachel wiped her eyes. She said, "He doesn't scare me." "Who doesn't?" the judge asked gently, peering down. Lily looked up. Her voice was soft, but stronger this time. "Him," she said, pointing at Max. Then her eyes drifted toward her biological father. "But he did." The room fell completely still. Even the court reporter stopped typing. Marla's hand flew to her mouth. Rachel broke into quiet sobs. Max remained still, almost proud, as if knowing what his presence had done. Judge Monroe closed her file slowly and looked at Lily with something deeper than authority. She looked at her with respect. "I believe I've heard enough for today," she said quietly. And though the gavel had not yet fallen, everyone in the courtroom knew Lily's silence had just spoken louder than anyone ever could. In the emotionally raw silence that lingered after Lily's soft declaration, "But he did," the courtroom seemed frozen in time. The judge slowly gathered her papers. The court clerk fidgeted nervously with her keyboard, and the attorneys stared ahead, unsure whether to speak or sit in reverent quiet. No one expected a breakthrough, and yet a breakthrough had arrived, delivered not by legal arguments or documentation, but by the smallest voice in the room. The courtroom was adjourned for a short recess. Lily was led back into the waiting area with Rachel and Max. Still clutching her worn-out stuffed rabbit, Lily held on to Max's leash as though it were a lifeline, not a tether. She hadn't spoken another word since her statement in court, but the damage, or perhaps the healing, had already begun. Dana, the therapy dog handler, knelt beside the pair as they sat on the long padded bench. She gently reached out to stroke Max behind his ear, smiling at Lily without forcing words. "You're doing great, sweetheart," she said softly. "You're so brave." Lily didn't respond, but she didn't shy away either. That, in itself, was remarkable. Just a few weeks prior, Lily had reacted very differently to adults. Dana remembered her first encounter with Lily in a narrow, pale yellow therapy room at the courthouse. Dana had been invited by Marla to test whether Max might help Lily open up. Dana had walked in with Max on a loose lead, smiling softly as the girl sat motionless in a beanbag chair, clutching her rabbit as though it might float away. "Hi, Lily," Dana had said. "I'm Dana, and this is Max. He loves kids, especially the quiet ones." Lily hadn't flinched. She didn't move a muscle, not even when Max circled the room, sniffing the corners and wagging his tail. But Dana had learned over years of working with trauma survivors, especially children, that silence wasn't the same as absence. Silence often meant listening, measuring, calculating risk. Max, ever intuitive, had picked up on that too. He hadn't rushed toward her. Instead, he lay down a few feet away, resting his chin on the floor and sighing an audible, disarming sigh that seemed to say, "I'm in no hurry. I'll wait." 15 minutes passed like that. Dana barely spoke. Max barely moved. And then, as they were preparing to leave, Lily did something astonishing. She shifted forward, stretched her tiny hand toward Max's head, and touched his fur just once. Then pulled her hand back like she'd touched fire. It was the first time she had reached for anyone. Back in the waiting area, Dana recalled that first breakthrough now with pride. She watched Lily gently tug Max's ear and rest her forehead against his side. She didn't cry. She didn't speak. But her body language had changed. She was no longer rigid. She wasn't shrinking inward. Rachel noticed it too. "She's never done that," she whispered to Dana. "What?" "Touched someone without them asking first. Leaned in like that." Dana smiled. "Max is the magic." But they both knew better. Max wasn't magic. He was a vessel. A bridge. What was happening inside Lily was entirely hers, her bravery, her choice to trust again, to feel safe for just a few seconds longer than she had yesterday. Inside the courtroom, Judge Monroe remained at her bench, not yet calling the court back to order. She sat in thought, one hand pressed against her temple, the other flipping through the notes she'd taken during testimony. The gravity of Lily's whispered words lingered in her ears like an echo. The judge had presided over countless custody cases, dozens with complexities, heartbreak, even tragedies. But this one felt different. Not because the abuse was more severe, and not even because of the therapy dog, but because of Lily's will. The child had been battered emotionally, perhaps physically, and yet there she was, speaking truth with more power than any adult witness ever had. "He doesn't scare me." "But he did," the judge whispered aloud, repeating Lily's words to herself. What struck her most was not the accusation. It was the contrast. It was the clarity of Lily's distinction, the innocence of recognizing safety and danger, the subtle but piercing honesty a child could offer when uncoached and unprompted. She closed the file. She didn't need to read more. Outside the courtroom, Marla joined Dana and Rachel, sitting on the bench as Lily curled beside Max. She looked like a child finally finding her way back to childhood. Just for a moment, the silence around her now was no longer suffocating. It was peaceful. Marla took out her notepad, scribbling some notes. Dana leaned toward her. "I've seen kids come out of their shells," Dana said, "but I've never seen something flip like that." It wasn't the courtroom. It wasn't even Rachel. Marla glanced up. "You think it was Max?" "I think Max was the door." But she decided to walk through it. Rachel, still watching Lily carefully, nodded. She just needed someone she could trust first. "Not someone," Dana said, smiling. "Something. Something that didn't yell, didn't touch, didn't ask questions, just existed without expectations." That was the key. So many adults, kind, well-meaning, had approached Lily with strategies and steps. But Max brought no strategies. Max was just present. And that presence gave Lily permission to finally speak. When the courtroom doors opened again, the tone had shifted. Judge Monroe's face was still composed, still professional, but there was a softness to her demeanor now, a quiet understanding in the lines around her eyes. She looked directly at Lily as the girl re-entered with Max. This time, Lily walked without needing to hold Rachel's hand. She walked beside Max, her quiet protector, her safe place. Her voice might still be shaky, but her steps were firm. Judge Monroe folded her hands and addressed the court. "I'd like to ask the minor if she would feel comfortable answering a question." The room went still again. Rachel looked at Lily, silently offering her the choice. Lily nodded once. The judge leaned slightly forward. "Lily," she said gently, "do you feel safe where you are now?" Lily didn't hesitate. She looked up, first at the judge, then at Max. And then, with soft conviction, she whispered, "Yes." The judge smiled. Not a legal smile, a human one. "Then we will do everything in our power to keep you safe." The silence that followed Lily's whispered "yes" was heavier than any gavel could ever be. It wasn't just the word itself, it was how she said it. Not with fear, not with uncertainty, but with soft, unmistakable resolve. The kind of resolve only a child who had seen the worst parts of the world could carry in such a small frame. Judge Monroe sat perfectly still. Her pen hovered mid-air. Her eyes, sharp and seasoned from decades on the bench, shimmered almost imperceptibly. Lily's affirmation wasn't just a moment of bravery. It was a line drawn in the sand, a clear, undeniable signal of where she felt safe and where she did not. And she had said it all with one word. Max, curled at her feet, remained perfectly still, as if even he knew the power of that moment. His tail gave a soft wag, and he let out a slow, patient sigh that matched the rhythm of Lily's breathing. Across the courtroom, the biological father stiffened. He leaned forward slightly in his seat, jaw tight. The mother's lips parted as if to speak, but she said nothing. Her hands twisted nervously in her lap. The foster mother, Rachel, had to fight back tears. She kept one hand clasped tightly around the edge of her chair, grounding herself in the present, trying not to break the fragile peace Lily had just created. Judge Monroe leaned slightly forward, voice low and composed. "Lily, I want to thank you for answering me. That was very brave." Lily's eyes flicked toward the judge, then back to Max. "I know courtrooms can be scary," Monroe continued, keeping her tone gentle. "And I want you to know that your feelings are very important to us." Lily gave a tiny nod. Her fingers gripped Max's fur, absently petting the soft golden coat that had become her anchor. "Do you remember the last time you lived with your mom and dad?" the judge asked, her voice barely more than a whisper. There was a long pause, then Lily nodded again slowly. "Can you tell me, did you feel safe there?" The room held its breath. Lily didn't respond with words at first. Instead, she pulled her rabbit close to her chest, her fingers visibly trembling for the first time that day. Max sat up slightly and nudged her leg with his nose. She looked down at him, then leaned into his body. And then, almost inaudibly, she spoke. "No," she whispered. "He yelled. A lot." The court reporter paused, blinking back emotion. She typed slowly, carefully capturing every syllable like it was a sacred text. The judge didn't rush her. She waited. Lily continued, her voice still soft, but growing in clarity. "He hit Mommy, then Mommy hit me. I tried to be quiet." Rachel turned away, tears slipping freely down her cheek now. The judge exhaled deeply. Her gaze was solemn but unshaken. "Why did you try to be quiet?" she asked, still gentle. Lily looked down at Max again. She wrapped her arms around his neck and buried her face in his fur. Her voice came muffled. "This time, but it was clear enough, because when I cried, he got madder." A wave of reaction rippled silently through the courtroom. Marla, the caseworker, had seen signs, bruises, avoidance, sleep issues, but hearing it spoken aloud by the child herself pierced deeper than any report could. It was truth, raw and irrefutable. No lawyer could spin it. No class or counseling certificate could undo it. The biological father's face remained hard, but his eyes gave him away. There was no defense for what had just been spoken. Not even from a trained legal team. The biological mother broke down in tears. "I didn't protect her," she whispered, more to herself than to the judge. "I let it happen." Judge Monroe shifted her attention. "Do you want to say anything?" "To your daughter?" she asked. The mother looked up, shocked. The judge's voice was firm. "But only if it's to take responsibility." The woman stood slowly. Her voice was shaky but sincere. "Lily," she said, eyes glistening, "I don't know if you'll ever forgive me, but I'm sorry. I should have been the one to keep you safe. Instead, I let you get hurt. I let me get hurt. And I'm so sorry." Lily didn't respond. She didn't need to. The silence now was her decision, not her prison. The judge made her notes, then addressed the room with finality in her voice. "Court will take a brief recess. I will return shortly with my ruling." The gavel didn't fall. It didn't need to. Everyone knew the decision was already made. In the hallway outside the courtroom, Rachel knelt in front of Lily. "I am so proud of you," she whispered. "You were so brave." Lily didn't speak, but she leaned forward and wrapped her arms around Rachel's neck. It wasn't just a hug. It was a surrender, a letting go of fear, if only for a moment. Rachel held her tightly, not rushing her, not whispering anything back, just being there. Dana and Max stood quietly nearby. "She's going to be okay," Dana said softly to Rachel. "Not overnight, but she's on her way." Rachel nodded, still hugging Lily. "Thank you for bringing Max." "Max just opened the door," Dana said. She walked through it. 10 minutes later, the courtroom doors reopened. Everyone filed back in quieter now, solemn. Lily walked in hand with Rachel. Max followed beside them like a silent guardian, tail low, eyes steady. Judge Monroe returned to the bench, file in hand. After a pause, she cleared her throat. "This case has been complex," she began. "It involved abuse, neglect, and silence, both literal and legal." She glanced toward Lily, but it also revealed something far more powerful than legal. Arguments. The voice of a child who finally felt safe enough to speak. That voice, however quiet, carries more truth than 1,000 statements. She turned her gaze to the biological parents. "You had every opportunity to protect your daughter. You failed her. There are consequences for that." Then she turned to Rachel and Greg, who now stood together at the side of the room. "I hereby grant full legal custody of Lily to the foster family, Rachel and Gregory Matthews. Permanent placement will take effect immediately." Gasps and muffled sobs followed. Lily didn't react in the way adults might expect. No tears. No jumping for joy. Instead, she walked over to Max, knelt down, and hugged him with all her strength. "You're my hero," she whispered in his ear. And for the first time that anyone could remember, Max licked her cheek. For several moments after Judge Monroe delivered her ruling, the courtroom remained perfectly still. Not a chair creaked. Not a voice dared to rise. Even the usually stoic bailiff stood with his hands folded, eyes lowered respectfully, as if acknowledging a sacred moment had just occurred. The sound of the gavel never came. It didn't have to. Lily's voice shaky, raw, and just a few words strong had done what hundreds of pages of legal documentation couldn't. It changed the course of her own life. And in that quiet room filled with attorneys, caseworkers, and parents on both sides of the line between broken and healing, something extraordinary had happened. People weren't just listening. They were feeling. Rachel sat back down, arms wrapped protectively around Lily, who nestled against her shoulder. Max sat loyally at Lily's feet, eyes watchful but calm. He hadn't moved much during the entire hearing, but now his tail gave a slow, gentle wag. Lily's expression didn't change much. She didn't smile or cry, but there was a subtle shift in her posture, as if a burden had been quietly lifted from her tiny shoulders. A quiet uncoiling of the fear she had carried with her since the night the sirens came. Across the room, her biological mother wept openly. Her mascara streaked down her cheeks as she reached for a tissue from her attorney's hand. She made no move to approach Lily. There was a strange acceptance in her sadness, like a chapter had closed. Not unjustly, but necessarily. The biological father stared straight ahead, jaw clenched, unmoving. Whatever denial he had clung to melted away under the soft, seismic weight of his daughter's words. No amount of paperwork or parenting classes could erase the truth. Lily didn't feel safe with him, and she had said so with a clarity that no adult could challenge. The judge's voice returned, softer this time. "I want to thank everyone for their service in this case. But most of all, I want to thank Lily for her courage. This court will forever remember your voice." Then, turning to the caseworker, she added, "Ms. Jennings, I trust that transitional services will be in place immediately for Lily's permanent placement." "Yes, Your Honor," Marla replied, wiping her eyes. "And I recommend continued therapeutic support, including visits from Max, if possible." Dana, the therapy dog handler, beamed. Max simply stretched out his front paws and gave a yawn, as if to say, "Of course, I'll be back." Outside the courtroom, word spread quickly. Staff members and interns who hadn't been present inside the hearing began whispering about what had happened. Not the legal specifics, but the moment. The tiny girl who had spoken. The therapy. Dog who had sat beside her. The fact that the most impactful testimony had come from someone who, until then, had not spoken in over 4 months. One courthouse employee, a clerk named Brian, stood in the hallway texting his wife. A little girl just told the truth to a dog in court, and everyone cried, including me. Court reporters, shaken but inspired, typed up their transcriptions. With trembling fingers. One of them, an older woman named Sylvia, had covered courtrooms for 22 years. "I've seen people cry," she whispered later that afternoon, "but never because they were healed." That's what it felt like. That dog didn't just calm her. He gave her back her voice. Later that day, Marla filed the paperwork for Lily's permanent placement. She also called the therapy animal coordinator and requested Max be assigned to future cases involving children. "He's not just a support animal," she told the program manager. "He's a bridge between fear and truth." But the most unexpected ripple came from the judge herself. Judge Monroe, known for her formality and efficiency, wrote a brief memo to the District Family Court Administration that same evening. In it, she recommended an expansion of the courthouse's child therapy dog program. She ended it with one sentence. "Today, justice was served not by volume, but by presence." Let us not forget the silent witnesses who speak volumes. Meanwhile, Rachel and Lily waited in a quiet interview room as the paperwork was finalized. Lily sat on the floor with Max, gently brushing his back with a soft comb Dana had brought in her bag. Each stroke of the brush was slow and deliberate, a comforting rhythm that seemed to ease them both. Rachel watched from the chair, still awash in a sea of emotions. Relief, gratitude, fear, hope. She doesn't understand the full weight of what just happened. Rachel whispered to Dana. "No," Dana replied. "But she understands enough. She knows she's safe now. She feels it." "She's been through so much," Rachel said, her voice cracking. "And yet, she gave us strength in there." Dana nodded. "It's the quiet ones who move mountains." As they prepared to leave the courthouse, Dana crouched beside Lily, who now held both her rabbit and Max's leash. "Lily," she said gently, "Max has to go help other kids soon. But he told me he wants to come visit you very soon." Lily looked up, then looked down at Max. She leaned in close and whispered into his ear, her lips barely brushing the fur. Everyone in the room held their breath, as if that whisper was made of gold. After a moment, Lily stood, reached up, and took Rachel's hand. "I want pancakes for dinner," she said quietly. Rachel blinked. It was such a normal, everyday sentence. And yet, it was everything. They laughed. A real, unguarded laugh. And just like that, the spell of courtroom gravity lifted. As the sun dipped lower in the sky, casting golden hues across the parking lot, Lily walked hand in hand with Rachel toward their car. Max sat beside Dana, watching them go. His tail wagged one last time as Lily turned and gave him a tiny wave. She didn't say goodbye, just a wave. But everyone knew what it meant. It meant, "Thank you. I'm okay now." And that, in the end, was the loudest sound anyone had heard all day. That evening, long after the courthouse emptied, Judge Evelyn Monroe sat alone in her chambers, the faint aroma of stale coffee clinging to the air. Her robe was draped across the back of her chair, her reading glasses low on her nose. The file. On her desk, Lily Ann Carter, case number 328FC lay, closed but heavy. She had seen so many cases over her career. Custody battles fueled by revenge, children used as pawns, carefully crafted lies dressed up in polite legalese. She had ruled on neglect cases that made her stomach churn. But something about Lily's story wouldn't let her go. It wasn't the severity of the abuse. Sadly, she'd seen worse. It was the purity of how the truth arrived, not through a cross-examination, but through a child's whisper to a dog. A truth so small and fragile, and yet it had stopped everyone cold. Judge Monroe picked up her pen and began to write something she rarely did after court adjourned. But tonight demanded more than a ruling. It needed reflection. Today, a child found her voice not because of the law, but in spite of it. The system gave her a place to speak, but a dog gave her a reason. She set her pen down and closed the notebook. This was the kind of day that reminded her why she became a judge in the first place. Meanwhile, across town, Lily sat at the kitchen table of her new forever home, slowly eating a plate of blueberry pancakes drenched in syrup. Rachel sat beside her, her elbow resting on the table, eyes tired but glowing with peace. Greg had returned from work early and was now washing dishes, sneaking glances at the little girl who, just days ago, wouldn't even make eye contact. Lily still wasn't talking much. But she didn't have to, not tonight. She pointed to the syrup bottle and gave a tiny smile as Rachel passed it to her. That small smile was worth 1,000 words. When Lily finished, she slid off the chair and walked into the living room, where her stuffed rabbit and a brand new plush toy version of Max were waiting. Rachel and Greg watched her go. "She's opening up," Rachel whispered. Greg nodded, slowly. "She doesn't have to be fast. She just has to feel safe," Greg replied, wrapping an arm around his wife's shoulder. They sat there in silence, listening to the faint hum of a lullaby playing from Lily's sound machine. For the first time since she arrived, she had asked for it. And for the first time, she fell asleep with the door wide open. Elsewhere that night, Dana took Max for a walk through the park near her apartment. The dog trotted beside her, leash loose, tail swaying contentedly. The evening air was cool, but not cold. The stars peeked through a lavender sky. "You did good, buddy," Dana said, scratching behind Max's ear. "You gave that little girl something no one else could." Max looked up at her, panting. Softly, "She trusted you first," Dana continued. "Before the judge, before the caseworker, even before Rachel." Max barked once low and calm. Dana laughed. I know. You just showed up. But that's the magic, isn't it?" She paused, then added thoughtfully, "We spend so much time trying to fix things with words. But maybe healing doesn't always start with words." She looked up at the stars. "Maybe it starts with being seen and feeling safe." Max paused at a tree and sniffed the base before continuing along the path. There would be more cases. Ahead, more children, more pain. But for now, tonight belonged to Lily and the voice she found inside a courtroom that had expected her silence. The next morning, Judge Monroe's memo made its way up the administrative ladder. It included a personal recommendation to expand the use of certified therapy animals in family court, along with proposed funding initiatives and partnerships with local agencies. When asked why she was pushing for this change after decades, on the bench, she replied simply, "Because sometimes justice needs more than law. It needs presence." Word of Lily's case began to quietly spread across legal and child advocacy circles. The story wasn't public, but the professionals who had witnessed it began retelling it, always anonymously, always with reverence. The phrase, "the little girl who spoke to the dog," began circulating among courthouse staff like folklore. To those who worked daily with broken families, it was more than a story. It was a reminder that healing could happen, that even the smallest child could shift the entire room. In the weeks that followed, Lily began to speak more frequently, not in full conversations, but in bursts. A word here, a question there. She asked for water instead of pointing. She said, "Thank you," after dinner. She named her plush dog Maxie. And nightmares still came sometimes. There were still moments of hiding, flinches at loud noises, and silent tears in the middle of the night. But Rachel and Greg were there every time, holding her close, reminding her she was home. One day, while playing on the living room rug with a rabbit, Lily looked up at Rachel and asked, "Will Max come back?" Rachel smiled, kneeling beside her. "He'll visit very soon. He misses you too." Lily nodded. "I want to show him my new dog." "You mean Maxie?" She giggled. "Yes, Maxie is his baby." It was the first time she had laughed out loud. Rachel hugged her tightly, tears stinging her eyes. "You're doing so good, sweetheart. So good." And Lily whispered into her ear, "I feel safe." On the other side of the city, Marla closed Lily's case file with a feeling she didn't often get in her line of work piece. She added a handwritten note to the last page, placed permanently. Child verbalized feelings in court with support from therapy dog. Strong attachment observed with foster mother. Recommend continued emotional support and therapy. Outcome: hopeful. Then she closed the file and moved it to the closed cases drawer. But she didn't forget. Some stories stay with you. In the end, a courtroom had done what it was supposed to do: protect the vulnerable, seek the truth, and deliver justice. But it was not the law alone that saved Lily. It was a golden retriever with quiet eyes, a patient heart, and a girl who chose when it mattered most to speak. And because of that, everything changed. By Monday morning, the courthouse had returned to its usual rhythm, files shuffling, security scanners beeping, attorneys pacing hallways, rehearsing arguments under their breath. But something in the air felt different, softer, more alert. Clerks exchanged small smiles instead of rushing past each other. The bailiff, usually stern and aloof, paused to hold the elevator for a nervous intern. And Judge Monroe, known for her no-nonsense demeanor, was seen patting Max behind the ears. As he passed her office, the story of Lily, the silent child who found her voice through a golden retriever, had begun to quietly ripple beyond the courtroom, but then quietly turned to loudly. It started with a legal blogger, Mara Keene, a junior court reporter, who had been in the room that day. She wrote a short, anonymous post for her personal blog titled, "The Day the Dog Spoke for the Child." The post didn't use real names or identifying details. It simply told the story of a traumatized toddler who hadn't spoken in months until she whispered the truth to a dog in the middle of a custody hearing. "I've covered dozens of family court cases," Mara wrote, "but none stopped time the way this one did." There was no shouting, no dramatic confessions. Just a child, a dog, and the kind of truth that doesn't echo. It hums quietly until it breaks your heart wide open. She ended the post with a single line: "Some voices don't need to be loud to change everything." That post went live at 10:47 a.m. By 6:15 p.m., it had over 500,000 shares. Major media outlets caught wind of it next. Though the child's identity remained protected, reporters were fascinated. Could therapy dogs in courts really unlock trauma responses in children? Why wasn't this standard practice? What does it say about how we listen or fail to listen to children? By Tuesday morning, the dog that heard the truth trended across social media platforms. Readers shared their own stories in the comments. Children who spoke to pets before parents. Veterans with PTSD who found peace through canine companionship. Teachers who swore by classroom animals for special needs students. Then came the donations. The local nonprofit that trained Max Hope Paws suddenly saw their website traffic increase by 800%. Emails flooded in with offers. Money, volunteer. Hours, therapy dog candidates. Within 3 days, they'd received enough funding to expand their training program by 40%. Dana, Max's handler, was stunned. "We've worked quietly for years," she told a local news crew. And suddenly, the world is realizing what dogs have known all along. Sometimes, just being there is everything. Back at Lily's house, Rachel and Greg did their best to keep the swirling media attention away from their daughter. Lily had no idea she had touched millions of hearts. She didn't need to know. All she knew was that Max would visit again next Thursday, and that pancakes were now a weekly tradition. But Rachel felt the magnitude of it. Emails poured in from people who had read the blog post and guessed it might be their case. Strangers offered support, thanked her for protecting Lily, even sent children's books and care packages through. The foster agency. One woman wrote, "I was a Lily once. Please tell her she's braver than she knows." Another wrote, "Your girl reminded me why I became a family therapist." Rachel cried as she read them. Then she gently closed her laptop and returned to Lily's room, where her daughter was coloring a picture of a dog with golden fur. "Maxie has magic in his tail," Lily explained proudly. "It helps people feel better." Rachel smiled, hugging her tightly. "Yes, sweetie, he really does." Across the country, the impact continued to grow. In Portland, a juvenile judge submitted a proposal to add therapy animals to all child testimony sessions. In Michigan, a child psychologist published an article about nonverbal trauma and the role of animal presence in developmental healing. By the end of the week, 3 other court districts had contacted Hope Paws to inquire about pilot programs. And in Washington, D.C., a congresswoman from Oregon introduced a new bill, the SAFE Tails Act, Support Animals for Family Environments, a proposal to fund certified therapy animals for use in child welfare hearings nationwide. The bill wasn't flashy, it wasn't political, but it was real. And it was inspired by a child whose name no one knew, but whose courage had quietly rewritten what justice could look like. Back in the courthouse where it all began, Judge Monroe received a letter. It was handwritten, addressed only to the judge who listened, with no return address. Inside was a short note. "When I was a child, no one heard me. Thank you for hearing her. You changed more than one life that day." It wasn't signed. She didn't need it to be. She kept it in her desk drawer, right next to Lily's file, which she had long since archived. Every once in a while, when cases got heavy and the days felt long, she would open the drawer, read the note again, and remember. One afternoon, about a month after the ruling, a framed photo arrived at the Hope Paws office. No note, no label, just a picture. Lily, standing in the park, hand on Max's back. She was looking up at him, smiling, sunlight catching the curls in her hair. Max was sitting still, noble and calm, the wind ruffling his fur. Someone had captured the exact moment she leaned in and whispered something to him. No one knew what she said, but her face said everything. She was safe. She was heard. She was home. 6 months had passed since the courtroom fell silent to hear the voice of a little girl and the soft thump of a golden retriever's tail against the cold tile floor. In that time, the seasons had shifted. Winter had melted into a warm spring, and spring had burst into a bright, colorful summer. Flowers now bloomed in the yard of Lily's new home. Butterflies danced near the windows, and laughter, real, joyful laughter, had become a familiar sound echoing through the once quiet house. Lily had changed, too. The timid child who once clutched a stuffed rabbit in silence now sang made-up songs while brushing her teeth. She wore mismatched socks on purpose because she thought they were funny. She told knock-knock jokes to Greg and collapsed into giggles before reaching the punchline. She had learned to ride her scooter, to draw hearts, and to say, "I love you," without hesitation. But some things hadn't changed. She still didn't like loud voices. She still sometimes flinched at quick movements. And some nights, even now, she would wake up calling for Rachel in a shaky whisper, her eyes wide with shadows of something far away. Rachel would always come. She'd wrap Lily in a warm blanket, hum softly, and whisper, "You're safe now. You're home." And Lily, sleepy and small, would nod, curl into her, and fall back asleep. One particular Saturday morning in August, Lily stood by the screen door, wearing a sundress covered in sunflowers, holding something tightly behind her back. Her curls had grown longer, framing her face like soft vines, and her cheeks were dotted with pancake batter. Rachel knelt beside her. "What are you hiding, little sunflower?" Lily smiled shyly and revealed a handmade card. The drawing was simple, 2 stick figures and a golden dog in a field of grass. In crayon letters it said, "Thank you for helping me be brave. Love, Lily." Rachel took it slowly, holding back tears. "Is this for Max?" she asked. Lily nodded. "He's coming today." Yes, he was. Dana had arranged a special visit, something they did every couple of months as part of Lily's continued emotional support. Max had remained part of her healing journey, even though he'd gone on to help other children too. But for Lily, he wasn't just a therapy dog. He was the one who heard her first voice. He was her friend. When Max arrived that afternoon, the world seemed to pause. He trotted up the path with his usual gentle stride, his tail wagging in long, calm sweeps. Dana followed behind, smiling at the sight of Lily standing on the porch, bouncing on her toes in excitement. "Max!" she shouted, running forward. Max met her halfway, lowering himself to the ground as she threw her arms around his neck. "You remember me," she whispered into his fur. He did. Rachel and Greg stepped onto the porch, watching quietly as Lily led Max to her room. Dana followed, giving them space. Inside, Lily showed him everything. "This is Maxie," she said, holding up her stuffed toy dog. "She's your baby." Max wagged his tail in approval. Lily continued the tour with enthusiasm. Her bookshelf, her music box, her flower drawings taped to the wall. She handed Max the card she had made, placing it gently on the rug beside him. Then she sat beside him and pulled a book from the shelf. "Can I read to you?" Max lay down, head resting on his paws, and Lily began. Her voice wasn't perfect. She stumbled on long words, skipped pages sometimes, got distracted mid-sentence. But she kept going, slowly and sweetly, her voice wrapping around the room like sunlight. When she finished, she leaned into Max again. "You're my best friend," she said softly. "You saved me." Downstairs, Dana sat with Rachel and Greg in the kitchen. "She's come so far," Dana said, sipping her tea. Rachel nodded, her eyes misty. "She's still got some healing to do, but she's becoming herself." Greg added, "It's hard to believe that 6 months ago she wouldn't even make eye contact." "She didn't feel safe," Dana replied, "but you gave her that. You gave her a home." "No," Rachel said quietly. "Max gave her the moment. We just held on to it." As the sun began to dip behind the trees, casting a golden hue across the backyard, the family gathered on a blanket with lemonade and cookies. Lily sat between Rachel and Greg, with Max curled at her feet. Birds chirped softly in the trees. A breeze carried the scent of honeysuckle. The moment felt quiet, but full. Dana packed up Max's bag, preparing to leave. But before she could call him, Lily stood up and whispered something in his ear. Then she kissed him on the nose. "Go help the next kid now," she said. "They're waiting." Max gave one last wag of his tail before padding back to Dana's side. And just like that, he was gone. That night, Lily tucked herself into bed and hugged Maxie to her chest. Rachel sat beside her and brushed the curls from her forehead. "Did you have fun today?" Lily nodded. "Do you miss Max when he leaves?" Lily paused, then said, "A little. But he gave me something." "What did he give you?" Lily looked thoughtful. "He gave me my voice." Rachel smiled, heart aching with love. "And now what do you want to do with it?" she asked. Lily shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe help other kids like he helped me." "Sounds perfect." Outside, a new chapter waited unwritten. Unknown, but finally wide open. Lily no longer lived in the courtroom or the shadow of the past. She lived in books, in sunlight, in pancake breakfasts, in backyard giggles. She lived in her voice quiet, strong, hers. And she was no longer alone, because sometimes all it takes is one moment, one dog, one whisper, to rewrite an entire life. And Lily's was just beginning. Asterisk.